What kinds of wonder, what kinds of attunement are possible from that image failure? I have been dying to make a film or a set of films about Vieques for a number of years. And yet it is so fundamentally unfilmable, called slow violence. What happens after the spectacular moment when something drags on for years and years and years and years, and it's very hard for the media to pay attention to that. Hi everyone. So my name is Isabelle Carbonell, and today I'll be giving you a presentation called Stars Above, Stars Below, Wonder and the Limits of Seeing in the Bio Bay in Vieques, Puerto Rico. So first, I want you to look at this image, and I want you to conjure, what do you think this is? I mean, yes, there's a hint in the title, but just ignore that. And just try expansively to think, what might this be? It looks like a painting. It could be a smudge, a river. For me, it doesn't signify easily, especially if you were to see it completely out of context. Very, very important that. And it's actually the brightest bioluminescent bay in the world, in Vieques, Puerto Rico. Very close family of mine happens to live in Vieques, so I go there once or twice a year, whenever I'm lucky. And I have been dying to make a film or a set of films about Vieques for a number of years. And the Bio Bay is this incredible place, absolutely transformative when you experience it. And yet it is so fundamentally unfilmable. And I'm a filmmaker, and one of my favorite things to do is to film. So I'm first and foremost a cinematographer. So to have something so close but yet so far has been tantalizing for me. And I do a lot of work around questions of environmental disaster, more than human attunement, which I'll pack a little bit later on. And a lot of my work leans towards documentary, but very much also experimental. I also teach filmmaking in this very university, and I teach right now a class called A Cinema of the Sea. And there's nothing like actually going through the motions of teaching a class to learn so much about a topic. And so I'm literally, very literally and metaphorically swimming in all these ideas right now around the way that underwater and our oceans, but any type of body of water is represented in cinema. Really interesting. Also, other ways that it's represented, whether it's in a museum or also in an aquarium, ways that it's staged, way that it's kind of a spectacle. So all these different ways that cinema interacts with underwater. So as you'll come to know in a second, I'll explain more. The Bio Bay's bright glow only arises from contact, from physical contact. But it almost always fails to register on camera. No matter what an amazing filmmaker you are, it's very, very, very difficult, and I'll explain why and how it's very difficult to film. And so instead of kind of stopping there, which I did the first year, I was just like, this thing's impossible. And then I came to look at that failure to register in the camera as maybe something that was actually really productive. What kinds of wonder, what kinds of attunement are possible from that image failure? So I'm starting to think in my practice, so this is a work in progress, by the way, something that I'm actively working on right now. What if you don't get that crisp, spectacular, wow image? Is there something productive, and might that actually unlock other ways of knowing? So being a filmmaker, that can mean any number of things, as I mentioned earlier. I'm a cinematographer first and foremost. I also absolutely love to think through very deeply sound work, field recordings. Today, of course, I'll be focusing entirely on the image, not sound, which is also a very interesting topic to think about in the underwater space. For example, so this is a still from my film, A Mirror of the Cosmos, which looks at this very complex lagoon in southern Spain that is going through a whole myriad of environmental disasters and just went through a kind of a big extinction event. It's the first lagoon in Europe to have gained legal rights. So in any case, I think through and with bodies of water already in a lot of my work. So the bay, Biobay, as it's known, is a very natural extension of my work. And yet, it's so unfilmable. I want to situate you a little bit. Where is it? So it's in Puerto Rico, which is on the eastern edge of the Caribbean. And so Vieques is an island of an island. And it's on the east coast of Puerto Rico. Vieques has a really fascinating history, socio-political history, that I'm just going to really briefly go over. So, of course, it's a, postcard perfect place. It's got these amazing beaches, these amazing landscapes. But it's much more than that, of course. It's also a site of colonial extraction and U.S. military violence. So it starts with the sugarcane plantations that were largely worked by enslaved Afro descendants. And then in 1941, the U.S. Navy came and expropriated 2/3 of the island, and everyone got relocated to basically the middle section of the island. And then for 60 years, the U.S. Navy conducted live fire exercises, bombing, shelling, all kinds of other munitions, including napalm and uranium, depleted uranium. And that, of course, led to a lot of documentation of contaminated soil, water, groundwaters, coastal waters, multiple EPA violations. So I mentioned I go here for family, and a family of mine has cancer, and there's a lot of people. There's a very elevated rate of cancer on Vieques. Of course, it's really hard to trace and to say this caused that. So, it's a very complicated situation. And there's a class action lawsuit right now happening that my family member has joined over their cancer. So the Navy, there were huge protests, and the Navy left in 2003. The cleanup, of course, is slow if it's happening at all, and it's very contested. There are all these toxic residues. And it exemplifies very much a concept that I engage with a lot in my work by Rob Nixon called slow violence. What happens after the spectacular moment when something drags on for years and years and years and years, and it's very hard for the media to pay attention to that. So the violence, this kind of slow environmental violence that shows up also in bodies, is also very invisible. And it's also anti-cinematic. So this concept of thinking about something that's really hard to film and yet I want to show through film is something that is also kind of recurring in my work. So it makes a lot of sense that I'm interested in Biobay also as this very difficult to film place. Biobay sits within all of this context as a place of ecological wonder and also within kind of environmental justice. And there are signs like this one that says, explosive hazard, no access beyond this point, all over the island. Anywhere that there's kind of a beach place, you can access the beach, but you cannot go on the sides of the beach. So it's very, not in your face as you land, but it's very present in the lives of Viequenses when you're there. Biobay, let's come back to Biobay specifically. So its official name was Puerto Mosquito. Everyone calls it there Biobay, short for Bioluminescence Bay. It has the highest concentration of bioluminescence in the world. There are 700,000 dinoflagellates per gallon of water. It's an incredible density. The bay's geography is actually crucial. It's in this S shape, if you can see. And that narrow S-shaped channel actually traps the dinoflagellates, and they don't go back out to sea. And all around the edges are red mangroves that shed a lot of organic matter and that feed the dinoflagellates through tannins and leaf litter. So they have a very rich ecosystem. So how does this glow? How do these glow? There are 3 conditions that must happen for the dinoflagellates to glow. First, total darkness. Do you see how hard that is to see? And the audio here doesn't matter, by the way. So do you see how hard that is to see? So you need total darkness for them to glow. Any kind of artificial light suppresses the glow. and even natural light like the moon. If the moon's out, you can barely see the glow. Physical disturbance, so it needs some mechanical agitation to actually show up. It doesn't just glow by itself, unless if there's like heavy waves, which in the bay, there's no waves. And then, of course, you need a dense enough population. So in this video, I'm filming through a transparent kayak bottom. I've done no post-processing on it, so you can see how subtle the glow is, if even any of you could pick up. But I really assure you that in person, it is super vivid, and it's absolutely mesmerizing. And that gap between what you experience with your body and what is actually filmable is something that I'm very interested in. It's really at the heart of my problem and my interest as a filmmaker. So what are dinoflagellates? A dinoflagellate is a single-celled organism. It's not a plant, it's not an animal, it's a protist. They range from 30 micrometers to about 1 millimeter, so extremely small. The word itself, dino, comes from the Greek word dinos, meaning whirling, and flagellate from the Latin flagellum, which is a whip. And they have two whip-like appendages, so one that wraps around the cell equator, and then there's another one behind that kind of steers. And so the species in Mosquito Bay is called Pyridinium bahamense, which literally means swirling fire. It's a really beautiful name. So this is another video that I made, but I did post-process it for you. There's a point to what I'm building up here too. So the bioluminescence, this is really remarkable how it happens. The entire cascade from stimulus to light takes less than 20 milliseconds. So one of the fastest cellular processes known. So this is one of the only videos I was able to capture really successfully, we're gonna say. And it was taken again on a moving kayak. I'm not sure if I took this over the border right now or through the glass bottom, the transparent bottom, not glass. I did post-process this, as I mentioned. So why do they glow? The leading theory is the burglar alarm theory. So the hypothesis that the flash startles small predators, copepods, and simultaneously attracts larger fish. And the larger fish eat those predators. So this is one of those, the light is a distress signal that signals to the predator's predator. So here's the paradox for me as a filmmaker. The phenomenon requires total darkness, but cameras, they need light to record. So if you bring a light, you kill the glow. And if you don't, you get noise, you get grain, you get blur, and you honestly get absolute near dark footage, even though I have this one successful thing, but this is like one of so many attempts that I made to film this place. You can get a prime lens, so I'm going to talk shop just for some of you who may be listening or here who know something about cinematography. You can get a prime lens that can go down to the very smallest aperture, macro, you can have a sensor that's amazing in dark environments. You can still barely just, even with all that, get anything until you slow your shutter speed down. But if you start messing with the shutter speed, then you're already entering into, you're changing the way that you would experience it in real time. It does not look like that to me in real time. And so I think it's really important to think about the more that you try to fix the image. So again, that's already been post-processed. But the more that you try to fix the image, the further you drift from the experience. If you look at the tourist packages, like this one, the promotional images are straight up like fake. Like this one looks pretty manipulated. I think this one might have been pre-AI, but we could say AI could, create something like this. But they fundamentally misrepresent the experience because the glow doesn't just happen underneath the boat like that, right? Or you get this one. This is a real image, but it's one that's layered from many, 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 many images together, and they're photographs, and they've been exposed for a really long time. There's a lot of trickery to it, which I know and understand, and nor do I even mind. I think it's great to capture an image like this, but it fundamentally misrepresents the experience. The water doesn't just glow like that. And if you look at the small little circles everywhere, those are actually the paddle strokes that everybody has been doing, and they've just been layered upon each other. So, I'm really thinking about, was this bay unfilmable? Also, by the way, a very important note is that you can achieve an image like this with photos, but it's very difficult once you film. You can't overlay quite the same way. So I'm going to zoom out for a bit, and then I'll come back to BioBay. Ocean cinema history. So from the very beginning of ocean cinema, or cinema underwater, whether or not it's oceans, it's all been about making the invisible visible, about extending human vision into very inhospitable worlds, into a very hostile medium, the underwater. So the very earliest technology was the photosphere. So the photosphere was developed in 1914. It was literally this steel tube that had a glass window, and you lowered it into the sea, and so the camera stayed dry inside this tube while it was filming. One of the earliest videos about the film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was made in 1916. This is just a really short clip kind of showing you also how they are staging, not just that they're filming underwater, but how they're staging the underwater. So these were some of the very first underwater images ever recorded. And you can notice that it kind of imitates this aquarium-like view. Going forward into time, actually, this story was remade. It's been remade since as well. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1954. Big blockbuster. And here the underwater space is seen in a very different way, but still kind of continuing in line with the early footage I showed you. It is staged and contained. The submarine windows are framed like a spectacle, and the sea functions very much like an aquarium. So really, it's almost like a cinematic aquarium, a theatrical set. The diving suits you'll see are also this very old style of diving. They're everyone's upright. All the weights are actually, there's some around their waist, but they're on the feet as well. So it's this very, and this is kind of the very first diving suits. I won't get into all the specifics of the suits. But you can see how it's being presented. They're also looking at the seafloor. Going forward here, I'll skip Cousteau, was very important. He invented the aqualung in 1953. And this was kind of a big revolution because you could actually move through water. Today, we obviously have a lot of fancy equipment. There are 4K ROVs, deep-sea submersibles, underwater drones. And all of this technology has kind of produced this kind of total optical mastery. This footage, for example, is from the Mariana Trench, which, if you might know, the Mariana Trench is the deepest point of the Earth that we know of in the sea. It's the deepest known place in the Earth's ocean. And so this, for me, is kind of a limit case of like total optical access fantasy. Here's the thing. To achieve this, what do you need? You need light. So otherwise, this would be pitch black. Same goes for this funny guy, just as an example. So this is the Dumbo octopus, very cute, named after Disney's lovable elephant character. He's the deepest of all living octopuses, lives around 4,000 meters into the sea. But again, the way you can capture this image, you have to have light. And so this brings me back to BioBay. This is the video again. BioBay isn't the only marine phenomenon that needs contact to appear. I want to say also that I love filming. So a lot of what we know about the ocean comes from making things visible. But there's a tendency to think that once something is visually legible, it's known. So to document is to conquer, to have knowledge with a capital K. What interests me is what happens when visibility is difficult. So in the BioBay example, you cannot add light, otherwise the phenomenon disappears. So when seeing like that slows down, when the camera completely fails to capture the nuances, it blurs, it underexposes, it turns to noise. But that failure for me can be really generative, so it interrupts the quick slide from, I see it, I know it. So, in my work, I think a lot about this. I call it the panesthetic attunement, which is a little bit jargon heavy, but I'm going to unpack it for you really quick and then wrap up. I'm borrowing here from Hito Sterl's idea of the poor image. The bad images or poor images that are blurry, that are low res, where the degradation is so bad, can actually also be really informative. I've argued before that a poor image can lead to an approximation of a different kind of understanding of the world. It can make us see the world in a different way. So I don't know if any of you have ever had this exercise where someone asks you to draw something. Let's say they ask you to draw a fish. And you're going to draw a fish, and you're going to draw a fish from what your memory is of a fish. It's not going to look very good, probably, unless you're a great artist. But if somebody then shows you an image upside down that's blurry and doesn't tell you what it is and asks you to reproduce that, you'll reproduce that much better, and it's a fish, by the way. You'll reproduce that much better than you ever did by just going off what you think you know a fish looks like. This is the same concept here, that if you are able to enact your senses of observation without using the shortcut of what you think you already know, BioBay footage is poor in this sense, but it tells you of this embodied encounter. So I call this a panesthetic attunement. It's a way of knowing that is haptic, auditory, proprioceptive. So you have to actually be immersed to know, and you have to be responsive to the environment as well. Lastly, this brings me to wonder. When you think about wonder, for me, it's not that quick wow. It's not just that immediate spectacle, but I'm really thinking about it the way that Rachel Carson or Jane Bennett calls wonder, which is a sustained ethical attention. You stay with phenomena that exceeds comprehension, that goes beyond what you understand of it, and that generates responsibility. So in BioBay, that means holding the beauty of the glow and the contamination of the island together, not dissolving into the sublime, but staying alert and engaged. So what's next for me is I'm working on an audiovisual essay about this, or a series of films. I'm still yet to see exactly how this all turns out, but this is some of the beginnings of my research around the topic. Thank you so much.